Good afternoon. Welcome to the afternoon session of the March 7th Board of County Commissioners meeting. We have a nice agenda this afternoon that begins with a public hearing on public works. It's item 11A, Mr. Mokrahysky. We have a public hearing on ordinance number 2301 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 10.600-25 to update the flood hazard regulations within City of Eugene Development Codes 9.6705 to 9.6709 to align more closely with state law and the Code of Federal Regulations, SCFR 44. A number of city files to recite, which I will not. So, at this point, I will look in this once again. I will open the public hearing. The date today is March 7, 2023, and the proposed Lane Code amendments are subject to the applicable criteria identified in Lane Code 10.600-25. The order of the proceedings for this hearing will be first the report by staff, followed by public testimony, and then additional comments by staff. The board's decision may be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals in accordance with ORS Chapter 197. At this point, I'm going to call for a disclosure for Commissioner abstentions due to conflict of interest or biases. I'll begin with my left. Commissioner Lovell.
No.
No. Commissioner Buck.
None.
Commissioner Senega.
Nope.
And I have none. Then we will call for anybody in the House challenge the Commissioner's qualifications to hear the matter. I see no challenges. Then at this point, we'll hear the report by staff. Ms. Mokrahysky, I'm going to look at you, but to introduce your panel.
I'll turn it over to Jared and Jack.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Jared Bowder, an associate planner with Lane County and the project manager on the county side for this project. I'll go ahead and introduce Jack Blackham and turn the staff presentation over to him. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jared. I'm going to go ahead and give a short presentation. Can everybody see that? Okay. Guess I'm on the. Okay, well, we'll just start here. Thanks, everybody, for taking time to see me. Jack Blackham, project manager. I'm the permitting and floodplain manager with the City of Eugene. We are here today to talk about floodplain development code amendments that pertain to the within the urban growth boundary. So as you know, that there's a patchwork of unannexed and annexed lands, which is kind of why we're here in front of you. We're also doing a parallel process with the City Council. Jared is here to my right. He's our land use code lead. Emily Jerome is our legal counsel. She's from the Deputy City's Attorney's Office. And then Jeff Gepper is our city land use code lead. And I'm having trouble moving the dial here. Maybe this
Help is on the way.
Going quick now.
I can go ahead and run that presentation from here if you'd like.
Yeah, this computer is having problems. That would be good, Diana.
All right,
Thank you, Diana.
I will bring it up and run it. Just 1 minute. If you want to go on for a sec, I'll bring the presentation up and run it.
We can continue. Ms. Jones will bring your presentation up as soon as she's.
I had just closed it because he had started, so I'll just have to bring it right back up.
That's fine. So can I just?
1 second.
Please continue. Yeah.
It's launching right now.
Okay.
I'm going to wait for the presentation or just continue going?
You can continue if you can work without the
Thanks.
presentation, please.
So I'll just talk about the National Flood Insurance Program. That's kind of the reason we're here, is to the reason the code developed, the proposed code amendments are coming through is that FEMA oversees the National Flood Insurance Program federally. They have charged the Department of Land Conservation and Development with overseeing the National Flood Insurance Program within the state of Oregon. The National Flood Insurance Program is a program that both Lane County and the city participate in. It allows property owners and business owners to purchase flood insurance while also requiring governments such as Lane County and Eugene to adopt ordinances that protect against future flood losses. Can we go to the next slide? I think slide 4. Yep, right there, that's good, thank you. One back, thanks. So Department of Land Conservation and Development provided the model code on which the code amendments that you have in front of you are based. DLCD worked together with FEMA to write them for minimum standards, and so we know that by adopting those that we comply with minimum National Flood Insurance Program standards. Eugene has been a participant in the National Flood Insurance Program since 1986, and another reason these came about, these code amendments, was Department of Land Conservation and Development conducted an audit of our floodplain program, which they do occasionally, and that resulted in a number of requirements, one of which was to meet these minimum standards for National Flood Insurance Program development. We are also the city in Lane County, specifically the city, is a member of the Community Rating System, which is a voluntary program as part of the National Flood Insurance Program, but not required. And these are steps that we take, the community takes, to get a rating and a score, which ultimately ends up in a discount to flood insurance premiums for both residents within floodplains and outside of floodplains. So you can get insurance if you live in a floodplain, a regulatory floodplain, or if you don't. So, next slide, please. Thanks. So the proposed code updates, they are based on the tenets of meeting the National Flood Insurance Program standards. In some cases, this meant updating the existing language that we already have in code. And other cases, this meant updating new code language. So what you have in front of you up on the screen are the items that we were required to update and are new items that are not currently in existing code. The first one is a notification of community boundary changes. This is an internal process to the city. This doesn't affect structures or homeowners, or this is an internal process. The second are definitions and assessments and/or determinations of substantial damage and substantial improvement. So the first are definitions, more robust definitions and clarifying items for homeowners when they go through a substantial improvement process. The latter part of that, determinations and assessments of substantial improvement and determinations, are conducted by staff. So that's, again, another internal staff change item. There are specific construction standards for the following. An example of this would be whether garages are attached or detached, would be an example of a specific construction standard that we're adopting. And then the final bullet point on there is a reasonably safe requirement in zone A. So different flood zones, FEMA has provided a different level of analysis to determine the risk of different flood zones. Flood zones A are not provided with a base flood elevation, whereas flood zones AE, for instance, are provided with a base flood elevation. So we've included this requirement that when there is no base flood elevation provided by FEMA, the reasonably safe requirement would be 2 feet above, the lowest floor would be 2 feet above the highest adjacent grade. I will note that I think in your staff report packet at the time of publishing this, it was listed as optional, but after further clarification with the Department of Land Conservation and Development, it is an actual requirement. So this is updated. Just wanted to note that is maybe inconsistent in your packet.
That is a 2-foot number.
That is a 2-foot number, yes, correct. Yeah, so most everything else in the floodplain is based on an elevation above, mean sea level, but this is a distance above the highest adjacent grade. Do you want to ask a question?
Just a question about what is adjacent. What does that mean?
So right next to. So you have a foundation, and then you have.
Immediately.
Immediately next to, yep. Okay, next slide, please. Thanks. And so then those were the required items. During this process, we also identified some items that we thought were really important to include in this code amendment process. So in recognition that FEMA's maps are not perfect, that based on the scale of geography and the scale of data required to complete their flood maps, they've recognized that they're not perfect. And they've provided administrative processes called letters of map change. And these allow property owners to potentially remove their structure or a part of their property from the floodplain, which removes the insurance requirement, mandatory purchase of flood insurance requirement, as well as they are no longer applicable, floodplain development code is no longer applicable to them.
Can that go the other way also?
Can they be brought into the floodplain?
If by complaint or by a reevaluation by the city?
Well, the city wouldn't map.
Got it.
Yeah, the city wouldn't map it. I think, yeah.
That would usually occur when FEMA does their physical map changes periodically, when properties are brought into the floodplain.
Thanks, Jim.
So in recognition of those are FEMA processes, but as from a local level, in this code, we've added language that says that the preparation of that data to support those letters of map changes, that requirement is on the applicant. And the applicant is required to do all that work, and then we will, look at that, but it's FEMA signing off on it ultimately to make that decision whether or not the letter of map change is determined to be of a removal from the floodplain. The second one is that on some of those letters of map changes, we as the community have to sign a community acknowledgement form. And so we have included language that says if we don't feel that all of the requirements of both our floodplain development code and/or any other state or local permit requirements haven't been met, that we don't have to sign that community acknowledgement form until we feel that those requirements have been met by the applicant. And then the final one is a continuance of the 1 foot of freeboard requirement. So freeboard is a margin of safety that's added to specifically the lowest floor of a structure. And that is already in existing code, and we're just proposing to maintain that regulatory standard. That's also, as I mentioned, the community rating system earlier, that's a requirement for our current class. Eugene is a class 7, which provides those 15% discounts on flood insurance premiums. I believe outside of the UGB, Lane County is a class 6, which is 20%.
We improved our rating at our last community assistance visit, and so that's not effective yet, but that will be our rating.
So that work on the community rating system is really important, and so this freeboard is a minimum that they require as for certain classes. Okay, next slide. And so then that was what is included at a high level. This is some things that are important but are not included. Flood maps are currently in the process of being changed by FEMA. We're in a comment and appeal period right now, but those are not affected with the proposed code change in front of you. The proposed code also doesn't affect any existing flood insurance policies or the existing mandatory purchase of flood insurance for any federally secured loan. And then finally, any existing letter of map change that is in effect is not changing with the proposed code. Those are still valid. Next slide. So this is just a little bit about how the procedural process. We went through a joint public hearing with the Lane County Planning Commission and Eugene Planning Commission together. We got recommendations from both those bodies. We've been through a city council work session and had a city council public hearing on February 21st. We received no public testimony. We actually go to city council tomorrow for them to take action on the proposed code. And we are here today to answer any questions that you may have, receive any testimony, and comment if needed.
Excellent.
So with that, I'll take any questions that you may have.
And I will entertain questions from the board at this point before we move along to public testimony. Any questions at this point?
I just have one.
Commissioner Laval.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a quick question. In my mind, when you're talking about minimum flood distances and all that, there's a neighborhood near my house in Hayden Bridge that was part of the 100-year flood, as you remember, back in the 90s. And there was a house in there that a constituent asked me about floodplain issues just a week or two ago. I guess their house is maybe 2 or 3 inches above the minimum floodplain. So in this new wrapping of code, are they going to be then required to carry insurance because they don't meet the minimum 1 foot out of the floodplain minimum? Is that what I'm hearing?
You did hear that correctly. This was in, this specific instance was in Hayden Bridge.
Yeah.
So these only apply within the urban growth boundary. Are you asking about the?
Right, that's my question.
Yeah, these are only within the urban growth boundary.
So do you think is there going to be some suspect places in the future that this may come under that same restriction or mandate?
That if they are 2 or 3 inches above?
Yeah, if they're like outside in the county area, do those people have, I guess, anything to worry about, for lack of better words?
The county's already adopted these provisions into our flood ordinances, so this would apply to new development or substantial improvements to existing structures.
Gotcha. All right.
Would be when these elevation standards took effect.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Further questions? I just have a general one that I ask fairly often regarding this. When you're applying the standards for the City of Eugene, are you exceeding requirements, or are you meeting minimum requirements?
We are meeting minimum requirements. The 3 optional bullets that I listed, those are what would be considered higher regulatory standards.
Higher regulatory standards?
Those are above minimum.
Required. So we are making higher regulatory standards than is required. The City of Eugene is requiring tighter regulations, making it more difficult to build than is required. Making it more restrictive to build than is required.
Yeah, we can go to slide 6 if you want. They're based on the tenets of minimizing future flood damage. So
Yeah.
that may provide some complications during the permitting process.
Right. So but the simple question, the City of Eugene, a statement, tell me if it's true, City of Eugene is passing tighter regulations than is required by the regulating authority. Therefore, if we pass to the level that is required by the regulating authority, it would be less restrictive building than the City of Eugene is actually imposing.
Yes, these are more restrictive than the
These
minimum
are more
standards.
restrictive. So we are, in fact, Emily, you can maybe help. Emily has been doing this for 20 years now for me.
Well,
So.
it's pretty nuanced, and
Yeah.
it may be, so this is the slide that shows the places where the ordinance would go above minimum, and it produces a higher rating, and so it allows the insurance rates to go down when you do these things. But if you look at the nature of these, preparation of new technical data to the city for certain letter map changes. So these don't affect what kind of structure you can build. They're more procedural, what information needs to be submitted to have a closer look done at where the floodplain is on your property.
Okay.
So and as you go through each one, they're more like that. The floodplain administrator or designee acknowledgement approval for certain. And Jack, maybe you can explain that. The third one is the one that it's a continuance of a 1 foot freeboard requirement. So is there already a 1 foot freeboard requirement? And why is that on here?
There is an already, yes, the 1 foot freeboard is already in existing code, so that wouldn't make it any more difficult to build a house in the floodplain than it would right now.
The
So it-
existent Eugene code, but
Existing-
I'm talking about federal requirements, the requirements by the authorizing body. My point that I'm trying to make, and I want you to tell me that I'm wrong. What I think is that you're making it more difficult to build houses in Eugene. Tell me I'm wrong.
I don't think that
Or more
this
expensive.
does that. I think the experts involved have to submit more or different information. I mean, I guess arguably you could say maybe that will increase the cost that an individual would have to pay a professional.
Yeah, I think the first two, I mean, the first two ultimately, any letter of map change ends up, in the long run, assisting a homeowner. If they can show that their home gets removed from the floodplain, that's actually beneficial to them, right? So that is a net benefit. I wouldn't characterize this as more difficult to build a structure. Perhaps there are some more procedural items that they have to complete.
Which would make it more expensive to build a structure because professional time costs money and time. Consequently, even if it's a little bit, it does make it more expensive to build based upon the regulations that Eugene is adopting as opposed to the ones that are required. You're adopting regulations that are more strident than, that you've answered the question. That's all I need to know. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Buck, excuse me.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry.
I appreciate it. You know, it's taken me 4 years, I think, in this position to start, like, I completely understand all this stuff now, especially after going through rebuilding in the Holiday Farm fire. And, like, I never would have known what a LOMA and a LOMAR are, but now I know because we went through the whole process to get a whole swath of Blue River out of the floodplain. And so I appreciate it at a new level now, all that you have to do when you go through these updates. I understand, I think what Chair was trying to mention here is, you know, you have these other optional items. And it sounds like there may be a little bit more process to go to implement them, but you get, I think when you go from class 6 to class 7, the difference is a 5% discount on your insurance,
Flood insurance premium.
on an annual basis.
Right,
on
and it's
your
on
premium.
automatic discount, yeah.
So I guess it kind of depends, you know, how much the extra cost is up front versus the savings on the ongoing. And I don't have those figures, but, you know, if that's the option available to folks in this area, at least it's not a change for nothing, right? We're actually trying to help them lower ongoing costs. So, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I'm just trying to make it clear to the public who's also watching that having a savings on your flood insurance, if you can't get out of the flood insurance, is a big deal. It's not cheap.
Sure. Okay, thank you. I have more to say. Commissioner Laval?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, so just be clear, like if I was going to build a house, let's say on a piece of property with bare land, and the minimum flood by the federal standards was a foot under what Eugene standard is, that means I've got to haul in X number of loads of rock and engineering and all that to bring the house up out of the floodplain to not have all the expensive flood insurance that I'm going to be strapped with. I mean, just the added cost that the chair was talking about, not only in engineering costs and putting a house either out of the floodplain to avoid flood insurance or being strapped with a flood insurance premium that you didn't think of or didn't want on the course of building a house. Any way you slice it up, it costs more money. So I guess to be clear, and hopefully if I'm not putting words in your mouth, Chair, is that I personally would support adopting the minimum standards that the federal people put out and not put any added on to that the Eugene wants to put on, just for the sake of the expense overall over the lifetime of a property being more expensive by doing so. Am I missing something here?
I don't think you're missing anything. I just want to clarify that the first two bullet points on this list, which are the optional items, they're not required. They're not required for a homeowner to go through. If they choose to go through the process of trying to remove a portion of their property or their structure from the floodplain, then we've included language that supports our ability to recognize those processes, right? The only item that actually affects the structure is the third bullet point about the freeboard, which is already in existing code, so there is no change. So it's when we say more difficult, it's no more difficult than it is at present.
So the nuance is it's higher than the FEMA minimum standard, but it's in Eugene's existing code that's adopted and in effect today, that bottom bullet point.
Correct, yeah, thanks. It's effective right now.
So it would just be to continue having that in the code.
So okay, I understand that part. So is there also a system that we can put in place to get people through that process faster and without a lot of cost? Because it sounds to me like if they have to go through this process to do the first 2 bullet points, that too is going to delay construction or make it more lengthy, or does that have a cost? I mean, time is always money, yeah, right?
It is, without speaking about a specific instance, again, if a property, a portion of a property or a structure gets removed from the floodplain, then it may take net less time because they are not subject to the floodplain development code requirements, right? So yes, it does take money and time to go through the process, but ultimately they won't have to go through the floodplain permitting process if they are removed.
Thank you. And that's a lot of language, but the bottom line of this is that we're continuing the same requirement that Eugene already has in place. So the decision to make it cost more has already been made. We're just continuing that. And the fact is, we are exceeding federal, I'll call it, federal requirements in Eugene, therefore doing something that we have sworn not to do. Now, maybe there's a good reason for it, but increasing the cost of housing. And every little thing that we do to increase the cost of housing makes it more difficult to build, makes it more difficult to house homeless people ultimately. Okay, thank you.
Just had one.
You go ahead.
Yeah. Do we have any numbers on who might be affected in the 1 foot? Like who might be removed, who might get added? 'Cause it sounds like that's the threshold we're working at, right?
Yes, we don't have numbers. I mean, it would be anybody who wants to develop a new home or has a substantially improved home. So a substantial improvement is where the a structure is in the floodplain and they want to do improvements that cost 50% of the market value or more. That signifies substantial improvement. If they are over that, then they are subject to the floodplain development code requirements. If they are under that, they are not subject to those requirements, right? So the numbers and affected parties would be on who wants to develop.
That's my question, correct? Do we know how many buildable lots there are that are
I don't have
below
it.
a foot of freeboard?
No, I don't have a number, but it could also be, it could also, change with an existing home that wants to develop, somebody that we don't know. So, no, I don't have a number on that.
Well, thanks for your patience in explaining
No,
it
one
in
more.
extreme detail.
If I can, I got one more.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So let me be really clear about the value. You said 50% of the value. Is that 50% of the tax assessed value? Or if someone's close, can they do a new appraisal and make that 50% of the appraised current value? Where does that line
That
start?
is an option.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yep. But standard practice, we use the Lane County Tax Assessor real market of improvements. It's not of the whole land. It's just for the improvements on the property, the
Right, which is
insurable.
typically 30%, but 40% behind what's sale. Yeah, right.
Right.
Okay.
But they have an option to appeal.
Super.
Absolutely.
Once again, thank you very much for being almost remedial sometimes in explaining to me. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Happy to do it. Thank you.
So you answered my question. We incrementally, all the time, a little bit here, a little bit there, make it more expensive to build housing in Eugene. So, very good. Thank you. Then, any further questions from the board? At this point, then, I've already clacked the gavel to open the public hearing. I'll call for public testimony. Do we have anyone signed up? We have no one signed up in Harris Hall for public testimony. And Ms. Jones, do we have anyone signed up online, or are we monitoring that?
I am monitoring that, and I do see an attendee. If you have joined the meeting to give public testimony on this item, would you please raise your virtual hand, and we will call on you to give public testimony. I'm not seeing any hands being raised, Chair Farr, so I'm assuming this attendee just called in to listen to the item.
And I do see a bus unloading passengers. No, I'm kidding. Very good. It looks like we have no public testimony today, so any additional comments by staff? All right. Then, moving right along, then without objection, I will close the public hearing. And to the board, discussion? Do you have any further discussion, any questions? Then, in which case, I'm ready for a motion. Commissioner Buck.
I'll move approval of the second reading for ordinance 23-01 and set third reading for March 21st, 2023 at 1:30 time certain.
I'll second.
Moved by Commissioner Buck and seconded by Commissioner Lovall. Passage of the second reading and setting the third reading. Discussion to the motion. I am seeing no discussion. This is not the ordinance yet, so I'll call for general vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes 4-0 with Vice Chair Trigger excused absent. Thanks again.
Thank you.
You're really good at taking language and bringing it back in terms that people understand. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a pleasure, and I know it's a complicated topic, so
Is it-
many reasons.
Beyond we've even touched here. It's
Yeah,
very complicated.
absolutely. So thank you
And
so
Jared,
much.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioners.
Right on. Then we'll move along to item 12A, which is the Commissioner's business announcements from Commissioners. Commissioner Buck.
Elcock had their annual dinner here on Friday evening, and we had lots of awards given out, and I want to note a few. Our own Mo Young, Outstanding Citizen. Our intergovernmental team on the Holiday Farm Fire also won, and Ashley Espinoza from Lane Workforce also won. So we had a great group of folks, and it was very well attended down in the Cottage Grove Armory.
Seems she might be missing one, Chair.
Let's see.
Someone else who received an award.
There was one that you've not mentioned, so please, I'm going to ask you to mention. No, Mr. Mulcahy, can you bring us up to speed on?
Well,
on the
Commissioner
missing?
Buck was named the elected official of the year for, in particular for her response to the Holiday Farm Fire effort, so.
That is a tremendous honor.
You're
Congratulations.
welcome.
All right.
Sorry.
Must have slipped her mind.
So now I have a litany when people are in the room. When Becky Taylor's here, I have to mention Becky. Now that Heather Buck is here, I have to mention Heather. So excellent. Well done. All right. Any further announcements? Then any future board assignment requests? I am seeing none.
Nope.
Then, Mr. Mulcahy, this should be, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
We have two, thinking I
Yes,
had two.
okay.
I was waiting for someone else. Thank you,
Very
Chair.
good. Thank
I
you.
thought you said no.
No,
That's what I
I
thought you
have
said.
two, if you will, please. I've learned over the course of the last few weeks to be a little bit more than specific. So this is the question. First, I want to ask, I'd like to direct the board order for Sean Waite to conduct a cost feasibility study of the CBB, Community Benefits Bidding Process, to gain a more accurate purview of its continued viability and how it accurately affects the best use of project dollars toward the county's building projects. Additionally, the information would reveal how the community benefits agreements affects and impacts the development and growth of smaller private construction firms that have been benefited in the past from working within our capital improvement department. There's 4 bullet points that we want to look at. This should include a snapshot look at overall cost comparisons of projects past and future. It will verify the apprenticeships and our desire for job training. Third, it will verify the accurate scope of full insurance requirements from both sectors. And then D, it will reveal the future impact of the CIP projects for the coming 23-24 budget year, including any inflationary models, which is a growing concern of overall costs. So to repeat, I'd like to just direct a board order to just do those 4-point bullet studies of how this particular overview will affect the cost of the CIP projects moving forward.
And you said board order, could you possibly mean a report back?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I said, no, just a head nod about a report back from Sean Waite, yes, thank you.
Okay, all right. Is that clear? Okay, I'll Commissioner Buck?
I just have a clarification. Has anybody had a moment to reflect on how much time and energy that might take? Because my concern would be, depending on the scope that you've put together, is, how much time are we willing to have Sean go through to bring the report back? If it's just a couple of hours like last time, I'm totally fine with that.
According to her, there was most of this information was already readily available.
So we put like a 2-hour limit or something like that? You think she can get it done by then, by that? I would be okay if we make sure that it's not going to be this huge
Sure,
affair.
no, I understand.
There's not a open mouth.
No.
So, okay, good. Then, so you're asking for a report back, not to exceed 2 hours of staff time, on the community benefits, to
Bidding process.
to include the 4 bullet points that you mentioned. Okay? All right? Looks like you have 4 head nods on that.
Good,
Well,
good.
actually, was that a nod? Yes, it was. 4 head nods on that.
All right, thank
And
you
your
all.
second?
I have one more. Dan Dressler and Steve Buss testimonies this morning hit on some of the progress we've made in partnering with entrepreneurial enterprises and people that are helping us, bring people together and partner within the housing crisis. So there has been, I've been doing a deep dive on some of the properties that is foreclosed and owned by Lane County, and I would like to propose this. I'd like to assign a staff to look at our current inventory of foreclosed home and land properties of the county, which we have on our books, as looking those in the lenses of entrepreneurial endeavor possibilities for independent satellite care stabilization centers in Cottage Grove, Florence, Eugene, Springfield. I think the reason I want to do this, I have about 6 bullet points here that if you want me to go into, I can. But I think that we have locations in all those areas of foreclosed properties that all of the pluses and minuses we see of the stabilization center could be done on a micro manner by taking these properties the county already owns and assessing some of the accessibility and repair and viability of each property. And we could actually start that sooner than later and do some, I guess for lack of better words, litmus test cases of how these programs would work. And I have a couple of points that would look at surrounding requirements of becoming a location for permanent or temporary supportive housing, youth or a veteran village, if in case of a vacant piece of land, tiny home or transition housing, or a single mom recovery center operated independently of the county system, but with county participation. And that participation would be the property that we now have on our books as a foreclosed piece of property. Each piece of property would need a condition assessment. Some properties are in much different shape than others. Some are probably not worth doing. From a developer standpoint, I would like to, obviously we have to assess those costs. The accessibility requirements, the ADA and any infrastructure that would be challenging to that. The available transportation around each property, food and outreach services, that is important to people that are in transition and in temporary kinds of transitional housing. And this request would provide a loose cost estimate and answer some occupancy, fire, and egress requirements that would be required of those properties to operate under those types of housing. And this assessment would also be looped into the human health services, or health and human services, to access and coordinate volunteer, nonprofit providers, existing services, and volunteers within that area. This could be a center to where people's services would go in and out of this area. But it would be just, in review, a staff assignment to look at our current inventory of foreclosed homes that the Lane County could partner with independent entrepreneurial enterprises, such were described at today's public hearing, public comments, that we could test a few of those. And there's about 6 of those that are on the books right now that I'm looking at.
Okay. Commissioner Buck?
Thank you, Chair. So in response to that, I think there's a step in between that. Currently, we have a policy about what we do at the county regarding foreclosed homes. And back in the day, before I was in this position, I actually wrote that policy, and it was adopted by a prior board. And the reason I did that was back when I worked for St. Vincent de Paul, we really wanted to acquire some of those foreclosed homes in order to provide housing in the area. At the time, there was a challenge of making sure that we paid for the property management department. And so we as in the county in this instance. The homes that we had in excess of that amount were then, in theory, still viable to be able to be sold to nonprofit partners or other entities or private market. it's my understanding that we've never reached that level. We've never reached the level in order to go in excess of what we're paying in order to operate our property management department and to do all the administrative needs of processing foreclosed homes. In addition to that, if there was, in addition to that, those foreclosed homes then have a clouded title. And so private entities usually avoid that because if you can't have a clear title, you can't have insurance on the home, you can't fund it. If funder requires insurance, it's not going to happen. I think prior to the step of what you're thinking is a step of examining that policy again, seeing if there is actually additional homes and/or land that's going through the foreclosed property procedure that is in excess of actually running our property management department. And of those, what can actually be done on these properties? Because mostly we'll get properties that are in very, very poor repair. They will not qualify for any of the items that you're looking at unless somebody wants to go up there and redevelop the property. And some of them can be very small lots and you're not going to be able to utilize them for much. And some are, the land is sold to the adjacent party because it's a narrow stretch or something like that. So, I would suggest, prior to making this leap, having our property management department come back to us and share what the status is and share what the policy is before we then turn to determining whether there is alternatives for providing the services that you're thinking of. I love all those services, by the way. I just know that there are many structural and maybe policy barriers before we can even get there.
And I'm trying to determine if there's a consolidation of this request that could take place with it in a two-step fashion. One, to take a look at the properties that we have and assess and get a report back perhaps from the property management as to what the process would be to move forward with something more directly attuned to our needs in the county, which are providing intermediary and low barrier housing, so to speak. So is that a reasonable approach
Yeah,
to that?
I think it's a great approach. Yeah, I'd love it.
Okay,
Anything to get the ball rolling down that direction would be great.
okay.
It's been a long time since we reviewed that.
It has been, yeah.
It would be well worth it, I
Okay.
think.
All right. And then, so does that double approach, and
So we'll look at policy first, we'll get that direction, and then if we
can
get
come
clear
back
enough
around.
direction or know these properties are least viable as far as repair and that kind of thing, we could move forward. I'm in support of anything that gets that ball rolling down the hill.
is that clear then, Mr. Pokrasi, what you've heard?
I think so.
Okay, good.
find
I'll
out.
ask you to repeat it in a few moments.
Thank you.
All right, and thank you for the dual request there. Thank you very much. Moving directly forward on it. Any further board assignment requests? I'm seeing none. We'll move to, by the way, I'm going to step back one. This is, Commissioner Buck has been named the outstanding elected official for Lane County. You're the third Lane County commissioner that's received that award in the last 10 years, so congratulations. So that's good for the county commission, that we produce county commissioners who are being recognized by all government entities in Lane County, so that's pretty remarkable. So future board assignment requests are through. Mr. Mokraski, can you review assignments, please?
So the first is the cost feasibility study of the community benefits agreements with a 2-hour limit on that including the various things that Commissioner Lovell cited. The second one is an inventory of land in Lane County to be potentially used for housing and shelter. So that's what I heard to come back on number 2 was the inventory and the policy.
I think the inventory is kind of a sidebar on the policy. I think the policy is the main request, just a review of what the policy is regarding foreclosed properties.
Regarding foreclosed
And if
properties.
an inventory
Have
should
a
just
list
be a
of
sheet of what we
inventory is
have,
probably helpful to know that.
I do, I have a list.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Does that sound right to everybody? Yeah. No challenge to that? Then we have dispensed with executive sessions for the day. Is there any other business?
This is where I clear, what are the items that, Commissioner Bozovich has outstanding?
It could be, we could do it, yes, let's take care of that. That's qualifies as other business. Yeah, so you have an item on the on the assignments list that can be removed?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Commissioner Bozovich has requested an after-action update on some issues surrounding the 2022 Oregon Country Fair. Specifically mentioned were various issues surrounding outdoor composting pile, noisy events, etc. I haven't heard any complaints about that. If there are complaints, say this year, which I'm sure there probably will be. I'd like, yeah, at least then the items will be under my business.
Okay. So, Ms. Balcarres, to remove that from the future assignments request, is that something we should do next Tuesday, perhaps? Covered in the agenda setting meeting, we talk about future assignment requests, dropping an item from the existent list? Or can we do that just relatively informally and say, can you take that off the list?
If the commissioners agree to
Okay.
Chair Fogg,
Yes, Diana, I was hoping you'd say something.
we do need to drop it off the list in a board meeting with head nods, but I believe that's what Commissioner Seneca was trying to do.
Perfect. Then
So I will close that assignment based on this if the board agrees.
Let's look for head nods. You have it. It's unanimous with all present. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you.
That makes it easy, doesn't it? All righty. Any other business? Then my gavel will be adjourned for the day, and we will reconvene tomorrow morning in the BCC conference room for a work session on the overview of the Land Management Division. We are adjourned.